What would you do if your family's 60-year-old lake cabin was suddenly wrapped in barbed wire by the very people meant to protect your neighborhood? They didn't just mess with our property. They tangled with the wrong mother. And they had no idea. She's the state mayor. This isn't just a fight for a home. It's a battle for everything we believe in. I nearly dropped my morning coffee when I saw her. A woman in a sharp blue suit was hammering a massive red violation sign right onto our family's cabin. My grandfather's cabin. The one he built with his bare hands 60 years ago. Heart-pounding, I ran outside. "Excuse me, what on earth are you doing?" I called out. She turned with the slow smugness of someone who thought she owned the place. Her name tag read Mrs. Winters, HOA Compliance Officer. She didn't even blink. "This structure is in violation of Pine Harbor Springs HOA Code Section SN08, she said crisply, flipping through a massive clipboard. "The roof is the wrong shade. That boat's visible from the street. And these wildflowers? Completely non-compliant." Wildflowers. The ones Mom had planted every spring since I was 10. "This is a mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "This cabin's been here longer than this HOA has existed." She offered a tight, rehearsed smile and handed me a binder that looked more like a phone book. "When your mother inherited this property, it became subject to our current rules. You have 14 days to fix these issues, or face daily fines." And with that, she turned, got into her spotless white SUV, and drove off like she'd just done us a favor. I stood there speechless, binder in hand, until I spotted another stranger across the street. A man with a professional-grade camera, snapping pictures of the cabin like we were crime suspects. I felt my stomach turn. I called Mom immediately. "You won't believe what's happening. They're trying to penalize us for wildflowers and paint color." Her voice sounded tired, probably from another long day governing the state. But when I explained everything, I could hear the edge in her tone. "I was afraid of this," she said. "That HOA has been a problem for years. They've forced out families before. Intimidation, arbitrary fines, even shady property transfers. Don't sign anything. I'll be there this weekend." Over the next 3 days, I dug into that monstrous binder. Every page revealed something more ridiculous than the last. No bikes or toys allowed outside, no gardens visible from the street. Approved house colors limited to beige and gray. It felt like they were trying to erase any signs of life, any soul. Then, on Friday evening, something shifted. An older neighbor stopped by the fence. "You must be Mayor Morgan's kid," he said kindly. "Name's Jack. Don't let winters scare you. But be careful. Something fishy's going on. They're targeting lakefront cabins like yours." That night, I found the original deed buried in Grandpa's old files. There was no mention of any HOA, but there was something else. Our cabin sat squarely on the most direct route from the main road to the lake, a perfect gateway for whatever the HOA might be planning. And just like that, I realized this wasn't about paint colors or boats. It was about power, and someone was trying to steal our family's legacy, one fake rule at a time. I didn't sleep much that night, not after Mrs. Winters stormed off with her clipboard, leaving behind that absurdly thick binder of rules, and a threat disguised as a deadline. Instead, I sat on the porch Grandpa built, staring out at the lake as the wind stirred the wildflowers, Mom's favorites. That cabin had been a sanctuary for 3 generations. Now it felt like a target. And deep down, I knew something bigger was going on. By morning, I was already digging through Grandpa's old files in the attic. Yellowed papers, faded photographs, tax records. And then I found it. Our original property deed, dated 1962. It was clear as day. This land was never subject to any HOA, not back then, and certainly not when Mom inherited it just last month. But there was something even more unsettling. On the back of the folder was a hand-drawn map, probably Grandpa's, showing how our cabin connected directly from the main road down to the water. Our plot was narrow, but it cut straight through what would otherwise be unbuildable forest. If someone wanted lake access, for say a resort or marina, our land would be the key to unlocking the whole shoreline. A chill ran through me. Just then I heard a knock on the side gate. It was Jack, the neighbor who'd stopped by the day before. He looked uneasy. "You got a minute?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder like someone might be watching. I led him to the porch. He didn't sit. "I don't mean to alarm you," he began, "but something's not right. Last year, the Johnsons 2 doors down got hit with violation after violation. Ended up selling the place at a loss after the HOA made life unbearable. I nodded. You think they're doing that to us? Jack exhaled. Worse. The guy running the HOA, Gerald Thompson, also owns Big Pine Development, and now there's word he's planning a lakefront resort. He reached into his jacket and handed me a folded page from the local paper. The headline hit me like a punch. Luxury resort coming to Pine Harbor. Big Pine promises economic boost. The artist's rendering made my stomach turn. A sleek driveway carved through the forest. A sprawling hotel complex. The main access road? Right where our cabin currently stood. Before I could speak, Jack added quietly, "They need your land to make it work." I swallowed hard. They've been laying the groundwork for months. Fines, code violations, even forged signatures. You're not the first, but you might be the one they didn't expect. That afternoon, I took a walk along our property line, needing to see for myself. And that's when I saw them. Brand new survey stakes, fresh in the soil, marking a path that sliced right through our land and down to the lake. They hadn't been there yesterday. I snapped photos, documenting everything. My phone buzzed. It was Mom. "I'm on my way tomorrow," she said. "Don't do anything until I get there." But it was already clear. This wasn't just a nosy HOA. It was a coordinated land grab, legal in appearance, rotten to the core. They were counting on us to be quiet, to comply, to walk away. They had no idea who they were dealing with. And this time, they picked the wrong family. By Saturday morning, the hostility was no longer just bureaucratic. It was physical. I was jolted awake by loud knocking, not at the door, but on the actual cabin walls. 3 men in matching Pine Harbor HOA polo shirts stood outside, clipboards in hand. Before I could even speak, one of them had already stepped onto our porch and started taking photos through the window. "Excuse me?" I barked, rushing outside barefoot. "This is private property." The tallest one turned, barely glancing at me. "Routine inspection," he said flatly. "Section 23 of the HOA agreement grants us entry with 24-hour notice." "We never agreed to those terms," I snapped. He held up a sheet of paper with a shaky signature at the bottom. "Your mother did." That signature didn't even look close to Mom's. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "This is trespassing. You'll leave now." The 3 men exchanged glances. Their confidence slipped for a brief moment, and then they turned and walked off without another word. But the damage had already begun. An hour later, a silver Mercedes rolled up. Out stepped Mrs. Winters, her clipboard tucked under one arm like a weapon. Her expression was syrupy sweet, like she was doing me a favor. "Oh dear," she cooed. "You weren't supposed to see all this yet. We tried calling first." I crossed my arms. "Why is there barbed wire around our property?" She smiled tighter. "Safety precaution. Abandoned properties can attract vandals." "We're not abandoned," I barked. "Our contractor was supposed to start roof work today." She barely blinked. "Unfortunately, your renovation plans were rejected yesterday. 17 unresolved violations. You'll need to appeal at next month's board meeting." "Next month?" I said. "And what are we supposed to do until then?" Mrs. Winters tilted her head like a scolding schoolteacher. "Until the violations are addressed, this property remains flagged as non-compliant, and as of this morning, you're incurring a $100 daily fine." Before I could reply, Miguel, our contractor, arrived. One look at the wire fence and his face fell. "I can't do any work like this," he said, pulling a paper from his truck. "They sent me a cease and desist order, signed by Gerald Thompson himself. Says I'll be fined $500 a day if I step on the property." Miguel gave my shoulder a sympathetic squeeze. "I'm sorry. I've seen this tactic before." I watched him drive away, feeling powerless. Later that afternoon, as I circled the cabin to take more photos, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. Newly planted survey stakes, now reinforced with padlocked chains. They traced a clean, deliberate path through our land, from the main road to the lake, exactly where a resort driveway would go. That night, I stayed at the cabin alone. I couldn't bear to leave it undefended. Around midnight, headlights swept across the wall of my bedroom. I crawled to the window and saw 2 men with flashlights examining the property line. I recorded them as they hammered in more stakes, slowly inching our boundary inward. They were redrawing reality, one wooden post at a time. By dawn, a new notice had been zip-tied to our front gate. "Condemned property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Condemned. Without any legal process, without a hearing, they had declared war on our family legacy. This wasn't just HOA enforcement anymore. It was coercion, intimidation, theft wrapped in legalese. I called Mom again, voice shaking. They've gone too far. She didn't hesitate. I'm coming tomorrow, and this time I'm bringing the law with me. They thought this would scare us into surrender, but they had just pushed us too far, and they were about to find out what happens when you back the wrong family into a corner. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of gray, overcast sky that made everything feel heavier. But inside, a quiet determination hummed through the air. I'd barely poured my coffee when the cabin's gravel driveway crunched under the weight of a government-issued SUV. The door opened, and there she was, Mom, her mayor's badge gleaming on her lapel, her face set in stone. She stepped out, nodded once, and said, "Let's take our land back." We spent the next few hours cataloging every violation, every false document, every unauthorized stake in the ground. Jack, our neighbor, joined us with his binder of maps and records, proof that this wasn't an isolated abuse, but part of a sweeping scheme to push out lakefront owners. Just after lunch, another car pulled up, this time a dark sedan from the state attorney's office. Out stepped investigator Maria Rodriguez, rain still clinging to her coat. "The mayor called us," she said firmly, "and we've been quietly watching Thompson's development company for some time." She set down a thick folder on our kitchen table. Turns out, Pine Harbor HOA didn't just become strict by accident. Thompson's company purchased the HOA management contract 3 years ago. Since then, 12 properties have been seized, every one of them blocking access to the lake. My chest tightened. And all of it legal on paper. Rodriguez nodded. They rewrote the HOA bylaws, buried clauses. No one read them until it was too late. Before we could process that, Jack returned, this time soaked and breathless, clutching a waterproof pouch. "I've been connecting the dots," he said, spreading out damp survey maps, HOA notices, and hand-drawn property overlays. "It's not just random. Every property taken creates a direct path. Utilities, roads, lake access. He's building a development corridor. Cheap." Rodriguez photographed every piece, her jaw tight. "This changes everything. We'll need witness statements, testimonies, and we'll need them now." As thunder rolled overhead, I felt something shift in me. I was no longer afraid. I was furious. Later that night, we killed the lights and watched through the window as a figure crept across our yard, hooded, hunched, and deliberate. A rock crashed through the window, scattering glass and rain across the floor. Wrapped around the stone, a message scrawled in red marker, "Back off or worse comes next." Rodriguez didn't flinch. She called for a police patrol to monitor the property. We reviewed the security footage, and there she was, Mrs. Winters, HOA's smiling enforcer, caught on camera hurling the rock. 20 minutes later, the same footage showed her slipping violation notices into neighbors' mailboxes under cover of darkness. "She's building fake cases," Mom said, eyes narrowing. "We're not the only target." By morning, Thompson filed emergency condemnation papers on 5 lakefront properties, including ours, citing storm damage. There hadn't even been a storm, just shattered glass and his partner's lies. Mom's voice rose with fire. "Then we move faster. Jack, gather everyone affected. Maria, get us a judge." That afternoon, the Pine Harbor Springs Community Center overflowed with neighbors. People whispered, phones recorded, and at the long table sat the HOA board, stone-faced and smug. Gerald Thompson called the meeting to order. "Tonight we address 17 violations." I stood up. "This is how you protect the neighborhood? With barbed wire and forged documents?" The crowd murmured. Thompson stayed cool. "We followed Section 47B to the letter. Abandoned properties can be condemned." The back doors slammed open. All eyes turned. Mom stepped in, her mayoral blazer sharp, her presence undeniable. "I believe," she said, voice slicing through the room, "we need to address the what illegality of installing barbed wire without consent, of trespassing, of falsifying violation notices, and of harassing homeowners into giving up their properties." A stunned silence followed. Thompson stammered, "Madam Mayor, we didn't realize—" "Would it matter if you did?" she snapped. "Because we've collected enough evidence to prove a pattern of targeted abuse, property manipulation, and organized theft disguised as HOA regulation." She dropped a map onto the table. "Every seized property aligns perfectly with your company's resort blueprint. Coincidence?" Mrs. Winters, pale and shaking, stood from the back of the room. I can't lie anymore." She held up a USB drive. "This has recordings of our meetings. Gerald told us who to target. Chaos erupted. People gasped. One man shouted, "They took my mom's house over a bird feeder." The sheriff entered, badge glinting. "Mr. Thompson, we have questions about your use of HOA funds and these fraudulent signatures." As Thompson was escorted out, eyes wide with fear, I looked around at my neighbors, some crying, others clapping. For the first time in weeks, hope flooded the room. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned, and the truth had finally stood tall. The calm after the meeting didn't last long. 3 days later, the sky split open with lightning just before midnight, and the storm that followed felt more like an omen than weather. I was staring at the property's survey maps with Jack, trying to trace back all of Thompson's land grabs, when Mom's phone rang. Her face went pale. "They filed emergency condemnation papers," she whispered. "He's trying to legally seize the cabin, tonight." I bolted upright. "Can he do that?" "They're claiming structural risk from last week's storm." She didn't need to say it. There hadn't been any storm, only sabotage. Before we could act, headlights pierced the rain and tires crunched gravel. Fire trucks, police, news vans, all converging on the little family cabin like it was the scene of a crime. Then we saw it, flames leaping high from the back of the property. "No, no, no!" I shouted, racing toward the blaze, but a firefighter grabbed my arm. "Stay back, it's not safe." Mom ran up beside me, her mayoral badge outstretched. "What happened here?" The fire chief, a man with kind eyes and a grave tone, removed his helmet. "Deliberate arson. Someone cut the power lines and left accelerants behind the cabin. I'm sorry, this was no accident." I stood frozen, watching 60 years of family history go up in smoke. Then the fire chief handed Mom a piece of wood pulled from a nearby tree. A note was nailed to it. "Drop the investigation, or next time, we won't miss." The words sent a chill through the core of my soul. Not just a threat, a declaration of war. Jack appeared, soaked to the bone, clutching something in his arms. I was out walking the perimeter when I saw the fire. I called 911, then grabbed this. He handed me Grandpa's old tin photo box, smoke-stained but intact. Mom embraced him, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you." The next morning, our story exploded nationwide. The footage of barbed wire, forged documents, midnight rock throwing, and now this, arson, spread like wildfire. Every major outlet picked it up. State mayor's family targeted in HOA land seizure scheme. People who once turned away now turned up. Neighbors, strangers, supporters from out of town, bringing food, tools, offers to help rebuild. Even the ones who had stayed silent finally found their voices. And then came the hammer blow. Senator William Vaughn, the quiet political backer behind Thompson's shady development firm, was arrested on live TV. They'd uncovered the whole web: Thompson's shell companies, the HOA takeovers, the illegal seizures across multiple counties. And in the center of it all was our cabin, the last piece he needed, the one we refused to give up. But even in disgrace, Thompson didn't go quietly. 2 nights after the fire, someone slashed the tires on our contractor's van. Our mail was stolen. A drone hovered outside our window until Rodriguez, still stationed at the cabin, chased it down with the local sheriff. "They're desperate," she said, "because they know what's coming." And it came faster than anyone expected. The court froze Thompson's assets, dissolved the HOA entirely, and opened a criminal investigation into every home seizure under his watch. But the final reckoning came in a packed courtroom where Mom delivered her closing statement. She didn't rage, she didn't shout. She stood tall, in that quiet, commanding way of hers, and said, "This fight was never about one cabin. It was about power misused, trust betrayed, and a community bullied into silence. But no more. We speak up now, we stand up now, and we don't back down." The judge's ruling made headlines. Full restitution to displaced homeowners, HOA funds reallocated to rebuilding, and lifetime bans from public office for Thompson and his board members. As we walked out of court, the same neighbors who once avoided us lined the steps with applause. One elderly woman stepped forward and took Mom's hand. "You didn't just save your cabin," she said through tears. "You saved us all." And in that moment, surrounded by people who had once been strangers but were now something more, a real community, I knew. The war was over, justice had come, and the fire that tried to destroy us only made us stronger. The weeks after the courtroom victory felt like waking from a long, bitter winter into spring. The barbed wire was gone, the threats had stopped, and the heavy silence that once blanketed our neighborhood had lifted. But what came next surprised even us. It wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about rebuilding something far greater. On the first Saturday after the final ruling, our front lawn filled with people, some neighbors, some strangers, all carrying tools, paint, food, or just kind smiles. They came not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The little cabin that once stood alone in protest was now surrounded by a sea of volunteers ready to restore it, beam by beam, memory by memory. Mrs. Winters, once the face of HOA intimidation, showed up early with a tray of homemade muffins and eyes full of remorse. "I know what I did can't be undone," she said quietly, helping patch a cracked window frame. "But I'd like to do what I can to make it right." And she did. Every day, rain or shine, she was there, coordinating paint jobs, handing out coffee, quietly mending fences, both literal and emotional. Mom's old bench by the lake was repaired first. Jack and a group of teens from the local high school surprised us by restoring it, wood polished, nameplate gleaming. On the first evening it was ready, Mom and I sat side by side, watching the sunset turn the water gold. For a long time, neither of us said a word. Then Mom turned to me and whispered, "Do you feel that?" I nodded. Peace. Word spread fast. Other towns with troubled HOAs started reaching out, asking how we did it, how they could fight back, how to start anew. Our story had inspired not just media attention, but real action. A senator proposed a new law, the Pine Harbor Protection Act, designed to stop predatory HOAs from abusing power and suppressing homeowners. At its hearing, Mom stood in the state capitol building and told our story once more, this time to applause instead of skepticism. And as for the neighborhood, without the old HOA, something better bloomed. A group of residents, including Jack, Mrs. Winters, and even a few former board members, formed the Lakeview Support Association, built not on fines and fear, but on cooperation and care. No forced dues, no surprise violations. Just monthly potlucks, tool sharing, and plans for a community garden. Kids chalked drawings on sidewalks again. Wind chimes returned to porches. And that old blue rowboat, restored and back on the lake. Our cabin stood taller than ever, half original wood, half new lumber, all heart. We kept the burn marks on one beam inside the living room as a reminder of what we'd survived and how far we'd come. One evening, as fireflies danced above the grass and neighbors gathered around our new fire pit, someone asked Mom if she'd ever imagined it would end this way. "No," she said, smiling as she looked around. "It ended better. Because this wasn't just about winning. It was about transforming. Loss into unity, fear into strength, strangers into allies." And as we laughed, roasted marshmallows, and shared memories, I finally understood. This cabin wasn't just saved, it was reborn, as was the community around it. What Thompson tried to destroy had grown into something stronger, something rooted in people, in place, in purpose. And that's the kind of victory no HOA bylaw can ever take away. As the embers of the final bonfire faded and laughter echoed across the lake, I found myself standing alone by the shoreline, watching the last rays of sunlight dance across the rippling water. Our cabin, once wrapped in barbed wire, silenced by intimidation, now stood proudly in the background, a symbol not just of resistance, but of rebirth. And in that moment, I realized something profound. This battle was never just about property. It was about people, principles, and the legacy we leave behind. The HOA had tried to reduce our home to a stack of violations, paperwork, and arbitrary rules. But in doing so, they underestimated the one thing that binds real communities together: human spirit. Through every setback, every late-night confrontation, every anonymous threat, we discovered that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's the quiet decision to keep standing, to keep speaking, and to never stop believing in what's right. Watching neighbors who once avoided eye contact now share stories and tools with one another was the truest form of victory. Our cabin's survival inspired others to step forward, to tell their own stories, to seek justice instead of silence. And it wasn't just about repairing broken fences or scrubbing graffiti from garage doors. It was about rebuilding trust. My mother, the mayor, the fighter, the heart of our resistance, often said that leadership means showing up when it's hardest. She did just that. But so did Jack, who mapped out the pattern others tried to hide. So did Mrs. Winters, who chose truth over fear. So did the families who brought casseroles, letters, and candles after the fire. They reminded me that when one person stands, others will follow. It's never too late to choose integrity. And while the legal victories were satisfying, the dissolving of a corrupt HOA, the arrests, the legislation drafted in response, they were not the true reward. The true reward was seeing a once divided street come together, united by shared scars and stronger bonds. People no longer saw themselves as isolated victims of an unfair system, but as part of something larger, something worthy of defending. Our story has now traveled far beyond Pine Harbor Springs. News outlets, advocacy groups, and state leaders have echoed our calls for reform. But at its core, it remains a story about a mother and son defending their legacy and a neighborhood rediscovering its soul. So, to anyone listening, anyone feeling cornered by bureaucracy, bullied by rules made in shadows, remember this: even the smallest cabin, when defended with truth and love, can light the way forward. Don't let fear keep you quiet. Don't let injustice go unchallenged. And above all, never forget that standing up might not be easy, but it is always worth it. What began with barbed wire ended with a bonfire, and in that fire something beautiful was forged, a new beginning for all of us.